Good morning, everyone. Wow, I need the energy for myself. Come on. Good morning, everyone. Well, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for not just your time, but thank you for last night. You know, our CFO, Dustin Williams, and myself, along with some of our folks from corporate communications, investor relations, we were on an earnings call, and we were thankful for this part of the world for having done such great business with us. So thank you again for your faith, for your trust in us, and for really building this community that we've come to call EMEA. You know, it's a diverse community. It's Europe. It's Britain. It's Middle East. It's some of you got it actually. Well, it's still work in progress, so maybe. But yeah, I think it's been a beautiful last few years with EMEA, with the kind of learnings that we've come to had from the customers, from the partners. And I'd like to spend some time today talking about where we're really headed. And maybe do a brief demo of the thing that really excites us, one of the things that excites us around data itself. So what are we going to talk about today is about achieving invisible. And the word together is important because you and us, we have to do this together. You know, Ben talked about families and weekends, and that's what togetherness is all about. And the same thing is true for partners too. Like, how do we really go and do this with applications and certifications and things that really is not just about Nutanix. It really revolves around you and your applications and your workloads. So it's important we really think about invisibility not just as a Nutanix concept, but as a concept of this community. One of the ways, and I've been thinking hard about this, is this journey of invisible, first of all, is timeless. So how do you make something invisible? One of the ways to make something invisible is to make it like white noise, like it's everywhere. It's in the background, and it's ubiquitous. So you make something invisible by saying it's going to be everywhere, and it's white noise, and it's in the background. And you do that by making big things small. So what do I mean by making big things small? If you look at the history of IT, we have constantly gone and atomized big things. So there used to be a desktop, one per family. And that was a big innovation almost 25 years ago. And we made that smaller, became a laptop. Now it travels with us. We made that into a tablet, and now it's even more mobile, and it's smaller, and it's still very powerful. We made that into a smartphone, and it's just as powerful, and it travels with us in our pockets. And finally, we're talking about wearables. And that's been the journey of personal computing. It's atomization, atomization, atomization. It's how we miniaturize things is the way we have made computing, personal computing, into white noise. And not very differently, that's what we've done for enterprise computing. So think about it. You know, almost 20, 25 years ago, we used to have mainframes that would last 20, 30 years. And then over time, we made them smaller, a little bit smaller. This thing was no more $10 million. It was probably $1 million. You know, Unix servers would last 10 years, to Intel servers, to virtualized servers, to containers, to serverless. We have made a lot of this small because computing now needs to be everywhere. In fact, one of our products that we GA'd yesterday that we'll talk about tomorrow is the IoT product. And there you'll see how we have made computing into a white noise because containers and functions and message buses, they're actually running on a palm-sized server. And that's the new IoT gateway of the future. How you disperse computing into a small enough form factor is the way we'll actually make computing invisible. It has to be everywhere. So if you think of the history of Nutanix, there has been this journey of atomization that we ourselves have done across storage, compute, and networking. So what was storage like before hyperconvergence? It used to be big. It used to be fridge-sized. It used to be mainframe-like. It used to have teams of people managing storage and nothing but storage. And then there was a storage complex, storage area network complex. There used to be HBAs that used to be complex by themselves. and they all used to be running in a blade chassis complex, which was proprietary blade servers, proprietary blade backplane technologies, teams of people managing servers. Servers themselves are big things, just about 5, 7, 8 years ago, And they were all meshed together with networking, not just storage networking, but also proprietary backplane networking, fabric interconnects and fabric extenders and all sorts of complicated things that made up storage, compute, and networking. And with hyperconvergence, this idea that you could run things in pure software, running on commodity servers, we completely atomize the experience. Now you can do a single node add, and all of a sudden you get storage, you get compute, you get networking, everything is tied back to a commodity top-of-the-rack switch. We simplified things a lot. In fact, this journey of atomization continues for us as a company. The way we have gone and talked about filers and object storage services and things like that, they're all becoming small. And they're all being able to run, you can spin them up as pure software, running on the same servers that are running your applications like Oracle and Splunk and Citrix and so on. So we are in this constant journey of atomization and miniaturization and being able to do it in a way where you don't need humans to go rack and stack and mount servers before you can actually go and use them. Instead, it could be consumed by developers who could spin up filers, who could spin up object storage grids, who could spin up database virtualization, talk about databases today as well. And networking is yet another journey for us. We have made networking much simple, but we are not complete. If you think about the way we're doing microsegmentation, it's an amazing feat in the last 2 years what we've done with this idea that you can take a mini firewall and wrap it around an application, and the application goes down and comes back up, and you have protection built in. And it's a killer idea in network security that we as a company are really trying to figure out how do you bring the best one-click experience around networking itself. So with Nutanix, what you have seen around atomization, we have really gotten rid of this entire storage, computing, networking complex itself. That's the end result of hyperconvergence. The fact that we have gotten rid of silos of people who were doing storage only and networking only and compute only and virtualization only, and we are building generalists, cloud operations people, rather than storage ops and networking ops and compute ops and virtualization ops. We are talking about cloud operations people. Now, more things need to be atomized, more things need to be miniaturized, more things need to be dispersed. But before I get to that, one important thing that we believe needs to be miniaturized, I want to talk about the problem statement. So these are the things that you deal with. Laws of the land, GDPR, compliance, those things matter, not just in this part of the world, but pretty much everywhere now. EMEA is not a homogeneous landmass. It's 100 countries. If you add them all up in between Africa and Middle East and Europe and Britain, it quickly adds up. And they all have practicalities built into them. So when you talk about your computing architecture, your computing requirements, data sovereignty is an important one. Talk about laws of physics, data gravity. It's really important to understand that you will always be network challenged. There'll always be a challenge where data is going to grow at a faster rate than the pipe. So how do you move the compute to the data rather than data to the compute is going to be a challenge that you have to go and solve for. And finally, this notion of app predictability, that there are apps that are predictable, it's cheaper to own, and the apps that are elastic, that are cheaper to rent. So how do you meld this? How do you reconcile owning and renting? How do you reconcile elastic workloads, predictable workloads? Are problems that cloud has to solve for. But what does the cloud look like today? The cloud looks like this. It's monolithic, and the only model it serves is a rented model. So in the last 5 years, what we have all come to learn about the cloud is like it has to be massively large data centers, billions of dollars of capex investments, and it has to be rented. So the customer must come to this big cloud, this gigantic Death Star in some sense, and you have to consume it in that way. There's no other way to consume this. And the real architecture, because we have to solve for the laws of the land and laws of physics and laws of economics, is really a more atomized cloud. It's a network of clouds. And that's the journey of this company, Nutanix. How do you really make this giant monolithic architecture into something that's smaller, something that's white noise, something that's everywhere, something that's very mobile. You can bring it up for $5 million, $2 million, rather than $2 billion and $5 billion. This is what happened to PCs. If you think about the era of Apple in the 80s was vertically integrated, monolithic hardware boxes that were called PCs. And here comes Windows and says, look, a PC is about software, and we're going to bring suppliers under us and suppliers above us, and boom, that's the new ecosystem. That's exactly what happened to iOS versus Android. There was a notion of smartphone being all about hardware, and here comes a company that says, look, we can actually do smartphone as an operating system, as pure software, and you bring suppliers below you and above you, and here you have a smartphone as about an operating system. Cloud will need to be about an operating system, where it needs to be everywhere. And if we can blow this complex, this massive, gigantic, monolithic complex, I think in the next 3 to 5 years, we're doing a great job of really bringing computing to everybody. And we blast this out, and all of a sudden, you realize that you, as an enterprise, really have different needs. You want to be able to go and chase data where the data is being generated. And by the way, this part of the world is very, very, very aware of the laws of the land. We talk about GDPR all the time. Sovereignty is that important. But this part of the world is also manufacturing heavy, which means that you have a lot of people and machines and processes and operations at the edge. And you can't be at the mercy of the network. So laws of physics really, really relate to EMEA in general. And finally, laws of economics. So look, this part of the world actually plans. Right? They plan for 3 years in advance. They're not as credit trigger happy as Americans, we Americans are. You plan for 3 years. You do actually have something to be said about CapEx and OpEx as opposed to, well, we just do one thing and one thing only. So with all that being said, I want to focus on one of these laws, the laws of physics, the idea of data gravity. And I want to bring on board a person that I'm learning a lot from. I've learned a lot for just sitting at the back with him, talking about data, talking about Industry 4.0. Please welcome Chris Hollenbeck, SVP Databases and Database Management from SAP.
Hey, man. How are you? It's great to see you.
Thank you. Now, Chris, I actually failed you. You asked me about if I'm wearing a suit or not.
I did.
I came in a jacket.
I saw you on video monitor, and I was like, you sold me out.
So hopefully,
I could have worn
not
jeans.
making you look any more formal. But you're an American who now lives in Paris.
Yep.
And you've been with SAP for 7 years.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time with you backstage.
Yeah.
Just talking about the evolution of SAP HANA.
Yeah.
But obviously, you have been working in data for a long, long time. Tell us more about the last 7 years, and maybe just relate back to the experiences that you had at DemandTech itself.
Well, I think it was incredible. I got to be part of a startup called DemandTech, and it took years to build. We took in all the transaction log data from every major retailer in the world. Think about Target, Best Buy, Walmart. Just to import the data of someone like Walmart was going to take 6 months. Forget the data cleansing and all the things you do from a data science perspective, because we were going to be building nonlinear regression models on it. It was impossible. And so we took 4 years to build our own system, building a new technology called data flow engines and working with programmers that had come out of Cray. And then I saw HANA introduced by a friend of mine, and we could have built it in 4 months, what took us 4 years. And I said, everything changes today. When I saw that, and I went to SAP and I said, I'll take any job you guys have. And that was it. The ability to not only take in massive data feeds at high speed due to in-memory computing, but the fact that it wasn't just a database, the fact that we could do predictive, now we can do machine learning, now that we've come there, but doing that all in one central system, and how that changes literally the world, from doing things like cancer research, smart cities, but yes, also running corporations. It's been exciting.
You mentioned a very fascinating fact about how 76% of world's GDP actually deals with SAP, and SAP actually goes and processes a lot of that.
Yeah, it's that huge company you don't know that's always in your life,
yep.
but half the people don't even know its name.
Now, Europe is SAP territory in some ways, and
Yeah.
you are passionate about this one topic, which is the gravity of data.
Yeah.
Tell us more about it.
It's a philosophy for people to manage their data. If you think about data, it has density. There's a component to it. You can take stuff like your customer data. Let's talk about ERP data. It is incredibly value dense. It tells you who are they, what are their subsidiaries, what have they bought from me, what are the service calls, what is the BOM as built, as maintained. Everything's in there, right? Very value dense. Then you have other data, though, like IoT data. 99.999% of it is completely boring. It is all within range. I've got a motor, torque, voltage, exactly what I expected. It's boring. That data needs refinement before it becomes interesting. And what you notice is when you have density of data, it attracts other information, because moving data around is expensive. The higher the value of the data, the more security, the more governance. A lot of times that ends up on-prem, but a lot of that data, that very non-value dense data, is sitting up in the clouds, in edge stores, key value stores. It's spread all over, but to have meaning, to be used in machine learning, it needs to be repatriated, refined and repatriated. In multi-cloud environments, that's hard. And you in this audience need to be thinking about, where's that center of gravity going to be? Do I want that data to be in Azure and Amazon and Google? Do I want that on-prem? Because it is very expensive to move once you start building up petabytes, and you're going to be moving to exabytes. And once you do that, that gravity is just going to pull more data in. You're not going to have a choice where you do that. One of the beautiful things about the work we're doing with you is that we're trying to give freedom to that. I can start on-prem, I can push things up into the right infrastructure based on who's got the right data center, who's got the right tools we're trying to use, what partner we're working with, and bring that all together and give you freedom so that you don't have lock-in. And that's what I think is brilliant about the partnership.
Yeah, in fact, we were talking backstage about this too. As we talk about our next foray, our next life is about Xi, which is our cloud service.
Yes.
And how we bring the SAP HANA experience into Xi with disaster recovery, things of that nature, which you mentioned backstage was really hard problems, the lower half of database management and data management, backups and replication and patching and upgrades.
Yeah.
Tell us more about that SAP HANA experience of the last 3, 4, 5 years.
Yeah, well, we launched HANA, call it 7 years ago, and said we were going to change the database industry. Everyone said, why is this, at the time, 40-year-old German applications company building a database, right? And now it's the 4th largest in the world and still growing phenomenally quickly in a world. And it was because data processing had to change. You couldn't take old systems. The fact that you had users in a transactional system looking at data to make a decision, and then alt-tabbing to go look at the analytics on which they're going to make that decision, a data that's 3-5 days old. And now I'm going to go back here to make a decision. How not only could I make that data real time and do analytics in the context of the transactions, how could I do that all in one system and build new applications? But what's the hard thing there is that actually wasn't the hard part, to be honest, with HANA. That was a tough trick, but we've spent the last 4 years hardening the system. And it's how do I do different levels of synchronous and asynchronous DR? How do I do multicast DR? How do I have different zones of availability? How do I make it so that somebody can manage 1,000 instances? And also we get to the agility. I think this is the expense. Everyone's used to SAP, big applications company, right? That's fine. Stable, highly predictable workloads. A bigger part of our business is now the Agile side, and this is where the work with Nutanix. Somebody has a project and they need to spin up a massive data mart, or it could even go up into hundreds of terabytes. How do I bring up the infrastructure for that, the compute, then have the processing layer, and doing that in an Agile way, and doing that wherever it makes sense based on the gravity of the data. Is that on-prem, is it in the cloud? And I have portability, and giving people the agility to work. And that's what we've seen over the last several years. That hard work of hardening the system and all the things we talked about, as well as the security and the governance required for this highly value-dense data, which is what SAP specializes in, is so difficult and hard, and that's why the partnership is so exciting, because we think we can make that better at both the platform level with you and with us riding on top for the predictable and the unpredictable workloads.
That's great. I want to shift gears to one thing that we recently started doing with NVIDIA and Mellanox, this is about machine learning and AI.
Yeah.
And backstage, you were talking about how SAP has to get more intelligent.
Yeah.
You talked about Leonardo a little bit. Tell us more about Industry 4.0, how all this comes together with a more intelligent ERP system and a business intelligence. And you talked about the word trans-analytics, which is a very interesting word. Tell us more.
When you look at, I made the comment about going back and having real-time analytics and context. That's fantastic, and now it's good. But we don't want people alt-tabbing between an analytics screen and the main screen. I, first of all, want to give them an immersive experience, both on their mobile devices or even auditory, where there is no screen, because I'm in a factory or I'm driving a truck. How do we actually give them that experience, usability-wise, but where the analytics is in context to the data? Take that a step further, where the system's making recommendations real-time, saying, click here to optimize on revenue, click here on predictive, or excuse me, click here on revenue, click here on to optimize margin, or click here to optimize results for your best customers. Now we're taking it to the next level using machine learning, where it's learning based on the patterns of the user, and it actually will sometimes just make the decision for them. If they always do the same thing, why do I ask? Why don't I just do that? But that requires machine learning. And with that work, HANA was possible because now we have a 15-year partnership with Intel, where huge portions of the microcode in Intel, from you geeks out there with single instruction multi-data and AVX2, and then cache
for the
code
in-memory
currency.
work that you were doing with it.
Yeah, and now we've been doing that with NVIDIA. How do we bring that same level piece? Because NVIDIA, obviously, with a massively high number of cores, is fantastic for machine learning, and working with Leonardo on that component. And what you're seeing now is bringing together of these old world business processes, as I described, with machine learning and decisions, and bringing that together. And what you see now is business processes being automated, but now we've got to score in real time. Lifecycle management of models. All that's rather difficult, and all that requires huge amounts of orchestration. And that's the work we've been doing with NVIDIA on that piece, Intel under HANA, and bringing all that together to do next generation ERP applications.
That's awesome. Looks like day 2 is still a big challenge for anything we do with data itself.
Yeah.
We'd love to actually sit with you and talk about XI and disaster recovery and backups and replication sometime in January.
That's the plan.
Thank you so
Amen.
much, Chris.
This is great. Thank you very much.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And this work that we actually did with NVIDIA and Mellanox, as you can see, there's still a lot of data requirements for machine learning and AI applications. This one around Nutanix files. So we've actually been able to do a lot of storage goodness with some of these AI apps using a software-defined filer. You don't even need to have hardware anymore. You can have a cluster of these GPU servers, but they all need to share information. And it has to come from something that might look like an old world service, like file service, still very relevant in the new world of ML and AI itself. Now, I want to shift gears a little bit, talk about yet another monolith, which has been around forever, for the last 30 years, databases, relational databases. And in the last 15, 20 years, database companies have built engineered systems. We look at Teradata and Netezza and Exadata. And in some ways, even Amazon is trying to build some engineered system around S3 and trying to move SQL queries inside S3 with Project Athena. They're doing custom things to actually bring the data and the application close to each other, the SQL query and the data close to each other. In fact, Exadata was all about that. It's like, how do you move SQL queries closer to where the data is? Which has basically been the boon of this company, Nutanix, is about we've done a really good job of general purpose convergence of applications and data, where you don't have to write custom code, one for Oracle, one for Teradata, one for Netezza, and finally one for Athena itself. There's an 80-20 rule in convergence of data and applications. If we can actually do the 80% of it by moving data close to apps and only the intelligent data, the hot data, close to the app itself, then you can spend the last 20% moving some of this custom SQL queries and get cuter with convergence itself, which is what Exadatas and Athenas are actually doing. But the 80% of it, the bulk of this lifting data close to the app itself can be done with this architecture of hyperconvergence itself. So databases are monolithic. Everybody knows there's a ton of database administrators required to do backups and clones and provisioning them. Doing Oracle RAC will take you weeks and months of provisioning networks and storage and compute and things like that. So we said it's a great problem. We need to make databases, somewhat invisible. We need to make DB ops probably as simple as what we have made IT ops to be. And that's the big goal of this new service that we're about to launch. We've just announced the GA of it yesterday, is to go and shatter this thing around, databases need to be engineered, then you need to buy these expensive hardware, and finally you need a ton of database administrators to go and do things. So to talk more about this, I want to welcome on stage Bala Kuchibotla, General Manager of Era.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for coming, sir.
Thank you, Dheeraj. Very excited to be here.
Awesome.
Cool.
So Bala, you conceived this product almost 19 months ago.
Yes,
it's like the fruits of labor have finally come together.
Yeah, 1 year, 9 months. Actually,
1 year, 9 months.
Started basically
So
from
it's
Oracle
21
kind of
months
stuff.
almost now.
Yeah.
I'm
Cool.
probably not as good at math on stage. Tell us more about what you're seeing on stage right now.
Yeah, essentially, as you mentioned, basically we simplified storage, compute, networking, and all the building blocks of infrastructure as service, and brought this cloud-like consumption, web scale, and more importantly, the consumer-grade experience for the IT ops, right? Obviously, the next big question is, why not recreate this magic for DBA ops and DB developers? That's what Era is all about, kind of stuff.
So you're saying, well, we've simplified a lot of things for IT operations.
Yeah.
And there's a great opportunity for us to go and do this for DB ops themselves.
Right. So
Great. So what do you have to show here?
So this is what Era is all about. We are starting with two major services, basically. Era is your efficient, elegant way of managing database on Nutanix. We start with two services, provisioning and the time machine. We're going to talk about it.
It looks like you have a ton of logos here, Oracle and Postgres and MariaDB and SQL
all
Server.
the engines.
So you're saying, look, if I can solve this problem all at once, they don't have to go and depend on Oracle solution separate from Microsoft solution, separate from the have-nots, like the open source guys have not even solved a lot of
Exactly.
problems.
So this is pretty much like database as service.
So in a multi-database world, is there a generic solution that really brings you all that goodness that Oracle built in the last 10 years
Absolutely.
in one click?
All the goodness of database as service, the way that you guys think about AWS RDS, pretty much on-premise, but with some differentiation. So we're going to talk about the differentiation, our differentiation with respect to on-premise needs kind of stuff. We'll start with three things today. Provisioning, we're going to kind of help our customers cut down their provisioning from days to minutes. And after that, we will talk about backups, and then how do we kind of take the backups in the matter of seconds instead of hours, pretty much. And finally, we'll do how do you manage your tier 2, tier 3 environments efficiently, elegantly, almost like doing like a copy-paste operations. That's what Nutanix is known for, kind of
I'm
stuff.
getting dreamy-eyed. Are you going to show us a demo
Let
now?
me make an attempt. Yeah?
Great.
Cool.
So while you're talking, maybe I'll just spend a little bit of time telling people about the processes that DBAs go through, and not just DBAs. They have to talk to storage admins and compute admins and network admins, and this is the workflow. It goes from selecting a database engine. Talk more about some of that stuff.
Yeah, we're going to kind of cut down the complexity. We'll show you through a provisioning. Let me start with the provisioning, and I'll take one of the most popular database engines like Oracle. And then not just Oracle with single instance, but we'll go with cluster, actually 2-node, or even 3-node or 4-node. Just interesting data point, Dheeraj. I don't think any public cloud actually offers Oracle RAC database as a service for people, except Oracle Public Cloud. Even for Oracle Public Cloud, they only support 2-node RAC.
So 2 rack instances versus 4
We are going to do 4-node RAC.
And you're saying that Amazon can do this because EBS does not support shared volumes.
Kind of stuff. And most of our provisioning is all about through standards, basically. But the interesting part of the standards is customers can define their own standards. If you, for example, if you look at a banking customer, they will not be able to take these public cloud images and then just run the provisioning. They need to cook off their own PSUs, one-offs, and kind of stuff. So the customer can bring their own gold image and then do.
So how they can actually bring their own catalog is as important.
Yeah. Exactly. So let me give you a cluster name here. OK, and then the compute profile shapes that you can pick any profile the way that you want to do it. Again, it's the same cookie the standards that we are talking about. Looking at the network, for a typical rack VM, pretty much you need 4 IP addresses, one for private IP, public IP, scan IP, VIP. Anyone who has done the database administration, they will understand it. We're going to standardize that whole thing. All that they need to do is the network profile here, and then that's what is server about it. Now let me pick this database. Let me create a sales database.
So you get this hyper-converged experience where it's not just about managing snaps, but it's really doing VMs and networks, and
Absolutely.
everything comes together in
So
one.
all you need to specify the size, like 2 terabytes here. We will understand what does it mean for Nutanix as an infrastructure, how many volume groups that we need to create. On top of it, how do we kind of lay out the data for ASM, and then create the cluster services around it kind of stuff, right? And then you can choose the standardization for your parameters too. And you can hook up your pre and post scripts. That's the pretty much database step. And sorry, I forgot to give the password. That's very important. Let me give the password. And we go for the time machine concept. For every database that we create, we have a concept of time machine. That means that it can let you create an SLA of your RPO. If you look at there, that the SLA that I picked is continuous data for 30 days. That means that you will be able to create the database to any point in time for last 30 days. Once we got provision, the era manages it for you.
And that's critical because many of the data losses happen because of human errors. So you can really just go back to these last 30 days worth of data.
Absolutely. And not just snapshots, but we will be able to back up the snapshots to your favorite object store or even your backup vendor too. We are definitely integrating with AWS S3 on our own Nutanix buckets. And let me go ahead and kick off the provisioning. That's all it takes to create a provisioning, pretty much. Like we are talking about 4-node rack.
Now you've been able to provision a database in 3 or 4 clicks. You don't have to go to a network admin, a storage admin, a compute admin.
Gone are those days. Pretty much, it's all one click or few clicks, and you have this 4-node rack in front of us. Probably a couple of, it'll take some 10, 15 minutes to kind of finish the story. Majority of the time spent in rack database creation kind of stuff. I can't help it much.
But things that used to take weeks can now be done in 10 to 15
minutes. In fact, some of our banking customers say that the provisioning, they take 4 weeks to kind of end-to-end close a ticket. Now we are talking about 30 minutes here.
Beautiful. Good. So what else are you going to show us?
Yeah. So now let me go ahead and show some other interesting part, how our customers are trying to kind of leverage Nutanix to bring all their tier 2, tier 3 environments and then kind of make them very efficient and elegant. So here I'm talking about a database, HCM database. It's a standby database. What does it mean is the primary database is not on Nutanix. It's there in one of your engineered systems or bare metal, wherever it is. We are creating a standby on Nutanix and turning that standby into a time machine, right? So what you're seeing is a time machine that was created for the standby. It's pretty much running for about 5 months and 6 days for now.
What are these colors, the green color, the blue color? Tell us more about that.
So they basically represent the SLA that I just talked about it. If you look at the SLA that it is operating is the gold. The green color represents these 30 days of continuous recovery region. That means that you will be able to go to any time within this last 30 days and create clones and stuff like that. And then you have daily backups, weekly backups, and monthly backups, and so on and so forth. So basically, this is how people operate the backup strategy, right? So now let me go ahead and create a backup or a snapshot and then see what it means, right? So all that it requires is go here and then create a snapshot. Let me give a snapshot name here. This is all it takes to create an application consistent backup. What I'm trying to say is there is no difference between the result of what you're going to see of the RMAN level 0 backup versus what we are trying to do.
All of RMAN complexity is now completely abstracted out.
Yeah.
We made it invisible for people. In fact, even people who have not been doing database management can do some of that.
Yeah, essentially that is what it is. And actually we are fusing the application-specific APIs and then the Nutanix infrastructure power and trying to give this kind of beautiful experience for the customer. So basically what we're trying to do is we are doing an RMAN begin backup, quieting the database and performing the snapshots. We understand the profile and how the database is laid out there and then trying to do it. Looks like the backup is pretty much done when we are talking here, like under probably about 39 seconds, right? So let me go back to the time machine and see. So if you see the yellow triangle that's showing up as the backup thing, now what I'm trying to say about this point-in-time recovery for the last 1 month, you can go to pretty much any day, any time kind of stuff. So let me pick an interesting day. That is our Friday, like Black Friday. Like for example, if you think about a customer, big database, and it's slowed down because of Thanksgiving weekend, Friday kind of stuff, and you really want to create the database exactly at that point in time so that the people can debug and then they can optimize the database and so on and so forth. So let me pick the 23rd Friday, And, and then we'll go for clone from here. You can pick any time. Literally, I'm picking 9:58 to 22, but you can go to any seconds too. If you have a problem with your database to a particular SCN on Oracle, you can literally say that, get me to that SCN, and we're going to create a clone, right? So we are picking the point-in-time clone. And then, like what we said in the provisioning, pretty much, you can be being Nutanix, we are hyper-converged, we can create the VM and the data, unlike the other point tools where they're just managing the data, and someone has to bring the compute, right? So let me go ahead with small compute profile or medium. Like if you are a developer database, you don't need to pick the exact configuration of your production. It could be small, it could be medium. Let's go with developer network profile. And let me give a password for it. And if you are masking, right, if you want to give this database to your developers or QA, obviously you want to do a mask and pretty much run the show. So you can park the masking script around it, and that's all it takes. It's pretty much like, I can't bring the copy-paste experience like one click kind of stuff, but maybe a few clicks.
So you can do refresh and clone and recover all in one click itself.
Exactly. Now, while this operation is moving forward, we can go back to this time machine, and I want to show you one thing interesting. See, if you look at this backup zone, this time machine is taking the snapshots on Nutanix infrastructure. But let's say our customer says that, hey, no, these snapshots are great, but they are fast recovery area, but we really are talking about durability. These database backups need to be outside Nutanix. You can create the time machine and configure it and say that, hey, you know what? After 30 days or 40 days, you can pretty much give a policy, move the snapshots as application native backups. They are not anymore snapshots.
It's
they are
out of
like
place
backups
as opposed to in place itself.
Exactly. So if you see that, the time machine is showing the content that is available in the AWS S3 are our own buckets, and we're integrating with our own files and stuff like that, right? So that's the main important point, and then, so
great. So tell us more about futures. Like, what do you really want to do in the next 1 year? What things are coming?
So obviously, we are on this journey of this database as service. The next big deal is lifecycle management, patching. We are talking about thousands of databases. How do you manage them with your gold image standards, like what we call this as flocking subsystem kind of stuff? People can do self-service patching and then subscribe to maintenance windows. And the other big deal is application DR. This is like your Aurora of AWS kind of stuff. How do you harness this infrastructure power and create this application-centric DR, but leveraging the infrastructure for all databases, not just for Oracle. Oracle will do a point tool for them, but how about Postgres, how about MariaDB, how about SQL Server, and so on and so forth. So we're going to do application DR. And with respect to engines, obviously, SAP HANA is our big next thing, and there are many other database engines people are requesting to pretty much to be on, like Sybase and Cache and other kind of stuff.
So next year, this time, you're going to show us SAP HANA and everything around SAP HANA as well?
Yep.
While you've taken care of all the other 4 as well.
I'll try my best.
Thank you so much, Bala, for being here.
Thank you.
Well, as you can see, we are really trying hard to think about what it means to, simplify the lives of ops people, not just storage ops, networking ops, and virtualization ops people, but also database ops people as well. And at some level, now database folks can really manage all of infrastructure, which is what they actually get from a cloud. The experience is such that the infrastructure is invisible. They don't need to know a lot about storage and networks and compute to do a lot of things that Bala was able to show us in the last few minutes itself. I want to switch gear a little bit and talk about complexity. Now, there was this complexity in this globe. I'm sorry, I apologize for the fact that I couldn't show Europe here. We tried hard to get to show Europe, but then GDPR made it impossible for us to take a picture of Europe from up top, But the real reason is not GDPR. It's that Britain didn't want to be next to mainland Europe in the same picture, actually. No, but the real reason is that we wanted to keep a little bit more limelight in Saudi while it's still hot. Well, some of you actually got it, maybe. But as you can see, I think there's a complexity of regions. And it's not just one country. It's not just one continent. There's a ton of things that happens in EMEA. There is all these laws, the laws of the land, laws of physics, the laws of economics, a lot of things that make things complex as you have a broad portfolio of countries and laws and manufacturing sites and people and operations. It's really widespread in 100+ countries. Talking about complexity, we have a similar complexity of the product portfolio. So we went back and thought hard about the journey of a customer, the journey of a seller, the journey of a buyer, the journey of a learner. What is that journey going to look like for them, so that they can look at how to embrace the portfolio, not all at once, but in a crawl, walk, run phase. So in that vein, we defined a few categories. These are 3 categories. We all love the number 3. We talk about 3 all the time. There's 3 categories for Nutanix. Nutanix Core, AOS and Prism. HV is optional. You don't need to go and rip out VMware right away. You can actually start with re-architecting your data center, you modernize your data center with hyperconvergence. Over time, you can go and say, look, I can use AHV now, and it gives me a lot more benefits. Virtualization is invisible. So you start with making storage invisible, then you make virtualization invisible. And then you start talking about what does it mean to actually have a cloud-like data center. So this is where we talk about orchestration, automation, operations management, microsegmentation, things that anybody can actually do now, as opposed to being a network expert or a security expert. And finally, the fact that you can manage unstructured data with files. Again, it's a scale-out filer, which is pure software. You don't need to actually rack stack mount hardware anymore, which is a specialized piece of equipment only for managing files. And when you've gone through essentials, you'll go through the enterprise experience of Nutanix, which is a portfolio that includes block storage and databases management. Just talked about Error right now. Object storage, which is still not GA, but we are pretty close, as I'm told from Karan sitting somewhere up here as well. And then there's containers and Xi services. So there's a lot of things out there with the enterprise experience itself. But you go through it once you have experienced core, then essentials, and finally enterprise itself. And this is how we plan to go and simplify the journey of a lot of our customers. And in fact, many of them, and I talked about this in my earnings call yesterday, which would convert to a blog as well, so I'd love for all of you to read it too, is how customers consume Nutanix. How do they start with modernization of data centers? How do they get to a cloud-like experience? And finally, how do they live the multi-cloud world? And how do we help them live a multi-cloud world? So to talk more about it, there's a bunch of people who have worked really hard. And of course, in terms of achieving what we call the invisible, would not be possible without this team of engineers and designers and product managers. And finally, the person who has actually helped me build this company for the last 4 years. Let's get Sunil Potti on board. Sunil.